In Trans-Amadi, Port Harcourt, people knew Chika Paul as the man who fixed problems. Not the kind of man who spoke loudly, not the type who chased attention. But if your car refused to start at 6 in the morning, you called Chika. If your generator coughed smoke during a blackout, you called Chika. If your motorcycle made a strange knocking sound, you still called Chika. He had the calm patience of someone who believed machines were simply misunderstood. Everything talks, he used to say. All you need is patience to hear it. His small mechanic workshop sat beside a dusty road near the junction. A zinc roof, 2 toolboxes, an old wooden bench, and a signboard that read, Chika Auto Solutions, no problem is final. People trusted him, not just because he was skilled, but because he was honest. He never inflated prices, he never replaced parts that didn't need replacing. He even allowed struggling customers to pay later, which in Port Harcourt was almost suspicious. But that was Chika. Simple, quiet, reliable. He lived in a modest 2-bedroom bungalow about 10 minutes from the workshop, and he lived there with his wife, Amaka. If Chika was quiet, Amaka was the opposite. She was striking, the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked past. Tall, curvy, always dressed sharply, even when she was going to the market. Her wigs were always new, her perfumes always expensive, and her voice? Sharp enough to cut metal. Neighbors often wondered how the two of them ended up together. Chika barely spoke above a calm tone. Amaka spoke like every conversation was a battle. Still, from the outside, their marriage looked normal, at least until the accident. The rain had been falling since afternoon, thick Port Harcourt rain, the kind that turns roads into brown rivers. Chika closed his workshop earlier than usual that evening. The sky had turned black before 6. He wiped his hands with an old rag and locked the metal gate. His apprentice had already left. The street was nearly empty. He climbed into a customer's car he had just repaired, a dark Toyota Camry. The owner wanted him to test the engine one last time before morning. So Chika drove slowly onto the wet road. The wipers squeaked, the headlights cut through the rain. What happened next? No one saw clearly, but 3 things were certain. First, a loud crash. Second, a truck driver shouting. Third, the Camry crushed against a concrete divider. By the time people rushed over, the front of the car was mangled and Chika was slumped over the steering wheel. Blood ran down his forehead. His eyes were closed. Someone called an ambulance. Someone called the police. But the rain washed away too many details. By the time the hospital confirmed the news, it was already midnight. Chika Paul was dead. The news hit Trans-Amadi like thunder. Everyone knew Chika. By morning, the house was full. Neighbors, friends, mechanics from nearby workshops. Women gathered around Amaka, who sat on the floor wailing loudly. Her voice carried through the compound. Chika, why did you leave me? My husband, my only husband. She beat her chest dramatically. 2 women held her shoulders as she cried. Some people wiped tears. Others whispered quietly. Standing near the doorway was Emeka Okore, Chika's best friend. They had known each other for nearly 15 years. Emeka owned a spare parts shop not far from the workshop. He was taller than Chika, louder, more confident, the type of man who took charge when situations became chaotic, which was exactly what he did. Everyone, please calm down, he announced. We will arrange everything properly. He handled the hospital papers, he spoke with the police, he even paid for the mortuary deposit. People praised him. Emeka is a true friend. God bless him. If every man had a friend like that. Even Amaka clung to him at one point, crying into his shoulder. You are the only brother Chika had. Emeka patted her back gently. Don't worry, we will give him a good burial. Within days, burial posters appeared around the neighborhood. Large banners with Chika's face printed on them, celebrating the life of Chika Paul. Family members arrived from villages, church members visited. Condolence envelopes piled up. The burial date was fixed quickly, just 1 week later. Some people said it was too fast, but Amaka insisted. "I cannot keep my husband in the mortuary for long. Let him rest." Emeka supported the decision. Yes, Chika deserves peace. Preparations moved quickly. A white coffin was ordered, a church service arranged, food vendors hired. It almost looked like a festival, because in Nigeria, grief and celebration sometimes share the same tent. The compound was full before noon on burial day. Plastic chairs lined the yard, a canopy shielded guests from the sun. Music played softly from speakers. Women in black wrappers whispered amongst themselves. Men drank bottled beer under a mango tree. At the center of it all sat the coffin, polished, white, decorated with gold handles. Inside it lay the body everyone believed was Chika Paul, dressed in a black suit, eyes closed, still, peaceful. Amaka sat beside the coffin wearing a long black gown. Dark sunglasses covered her eyes. She cried occasionally, but not as violently as the first day. The pastor cleared his throat. "It is time for the final prayers." The crowd quieted. The atmosphere became heavy, sacred. The pastor opened his Bible. "Dust we are, and to dust we shall return." People bowed their heads. The prayer lasted nearly 10 minutes. Then it was time. 4 men stepped forward. They were ready to lift the coffin. The grave had already been dug behind the compound. Everything was prepared. The pastor raised his hand. "May the Lord receive the soul of our brother." Then suddenly, a voice interrupted from the gate. "Wait." It wasn't loud, but it carried across the entire compound. People turned. A man stood at the entrance. Sweat covered his body. His chest rose and fell as if he had been running. Dust covered his clothes. At first, nobody reacted because they were trying to understand something impossible. The man looked exactly like the dead one. Same face, same height, same eyes, same scar above the left eyebrow. Someone dropped a bottle. It shattered on the ground. The compound fell into silence so deep that even the wind seemed to stop. The man walked slowly towards the coffin, step by step. People moved away from him as if he carried electricity. Amaka removed her sunglasses. Her eyes widened. Her lips trembled. Emeka stared like he had seen a ghost, because the man approaching them was Chika Paul, alive, breathing, real. The pastor stepped back. "Jesus!" Whispers spread across the crowd. "Is that really him? But the coffin?" The man stopped beside the coffin. He looked down at the body inside. His own face stared back at him. Then he slowly turned towards the crowd. His eyes were calm, but there was something terrifying inside them. He pointed at the coffin. Then he pointed at his wife and spoke in a voice that froze every soul present. "Before you bury that man," he paused. The compound held its breath. Then he finished the sentence. "Ask my wife why she killed me." Gasps exploded across the crowd. Someone screamed. Amaka staggered backward. Her face turned pale. Emeka's hand began to tremble. The pastor looked like he might faint, because suddenly the funeral was no longer a funeral. It had become something else, something darker, something dangerous. The man who was supposed to be dead had returned, and he had just accused his own wife of murder. The entire compound stared at Amaka, waiting, watching. But the real horror had not even begun, because inside the coffin, something moved. Just slightly. A tiny movement, so small that only one person noticed. The gravedigger. He leaned closer. His eyes widened. Then he whispered in fear. "The corpse," he whispered. His voice shook, just blinked.